Ethan had always been the type to keep his distance. As a soldier aboard the human warship Valor, he knew the importance of discipline and professionalism. But nothing had prepared him for the day he met Princess Zara. It was a quiet morning, the hum of the engines barely audible as the ship floated through deep space. Ethan had just finished his usual training session when he was called to the command deck. His commander, Captain Harris, stood with a serious expression. "Ethan, we have a guest," Captain Harris said, nodding toward a tall figure standing by the observation window. Ethan's eyes narrowed. The alien before him was a towering woman, wearing heavy armor that covered most of her body. Her face was partially hidden behind a helmet, but there was no mistaking the regal aura around her. This was Princess Zara, the leader of one of the most powerful alien species in the galaxy. The Vrixen. He had heard stories about her, stories that made her seem untouchable, feared by even the strongest warriors. Yet standing in front of him, she seemed just like any other soldier, albeit with more authority in her posture. "Princess Zara, this is Ethan, one of our top soldiers," Captain Harris introduced. Zara's helmet lifted slightly as she turned, her gaze toward him. Her piercing eyes met his, and for a moment, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. She was not the kind of leader who relied on words. Her presence alone was enough to make people pay attention. "Greetings, human." Zara's voice was cold, but there was something almost amused in her tone. "I've heard much about your species. I'm curious, are all humans as bold as you?" Ethan blinked, confused by the question. "Bold?" "Just a soldier doing my job, ma'am." Her eyes gleamed with an unreadable emotion. We'll see about that." Captain Harris left the two of them alone, leaving Ethan to wonder why they had been assigned to meet. Zara, though intimidating, did not seem like the enemy. If anything, she appeared to be studying him, almost as if she was sizing him up. "Tell." "Me?" she asked, stepping closer to him. "What do you humans desire the most?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He didn't know what to say. What did humans desire? Peace, prosperity, freedom? But he didn't want to sound predictable, I suppose. "What I want most right now is some peace and quiet," Ethan said with a light chuckle. He hoped the joke would break the tension, but Zara didn't smile. Instead, she tilted her head and narrowed her eyes, her lips curling into a subtle smirk. "Is that all?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "No ambition? No dreams of power or conquest?" Ethan felt a slight hesitation in his words. He had no interest in power. What was the point of it? In the end, wasn't it just a way to control others? "Suppose I dream of making a difference," Ethan said, his voice quieter now, "in a way that matters, not for power, but for something more, real." Zara studied him as if trying to read between the lines. The silence stretched on, and for a moment Ethan regretted his words. He had never been one for deep conversations, especially with someone as imposing as Princess Zara. "What do you want, human?" she asked again, her voice soft but sharp. Ethan, who had never been good with these kinds of questions, shifted. Awkwardly, it was like she could see straight through him, as though she was reading his mind. He knew he should say something serious, something profound, but instead, a reckless idea popped into his head. Maybe it was the way she was looking at him, or the pressure of the moment. Maybe he was just tired of being careful all the time. With a quick glance toward her, he blurted, "You." Zara's eyes widened just a fraction, but her face remained composed. For a second, Ethan thought he might have crossed a line. His heart raced in his chest, and he was about to apologize, but before he could, something unexpected happened. Zara reached up to her helmet, her fingers graceful and deliberate as she unlatched it. The soft hiss of the release echoed in the quiet room, and her helmet fell away. Ethan stared, wide-eyed. Princess Zara, the woman who was feared and respected by countless species, stood before him with her dark hair flowing down to her shoulders, her eyes now softer, but no less intense. She looked different, less intimidating, almost vulnerable, though she didn't show it. Zara's lips parted slightly, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Ethan was at a loss for words. He hadn't meant it in the way he thought she would take it. He had only meant to joke, but now, seeing her stand there, Unguarded and without her armor, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of awe and curiosity. "You think that's what you want?" Zara asked, her voice now quieter, almost playful. There was something different in the way she spoke. Was it amusement, or was it something else? Ethan didn't know what to say. His mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Is this some kind of test? A game? Or had he actually said something that had made her vulnerable? Before he could come up with a response, Zara took a step closer, and he instinctively took a step back, unsure of what to do. Her presence felt powerful, even without her armor. The tension between them was palpable. For the first time, Ethan realized he might have underestimated her. What was it about her that made him feel this way? What was it about Zara that made him want to speak out, to joke, and yet feel a strange pull toward her? As the silence stretched between them, Ethan felt as though he had stepped into uncharted territory. What would happen next? The air between Ethan and Zara felt heavy, like it was charged with something neither of them fully understood. For the first time since meeting her, Ethan couldn't figure out what was going on. He had been in plenty of dangerous situations, faced enemy fire and countless battles, but this was different. Zara stood still, her eyes never leaving his, waiting for him to say something. Ethan was still processing what had just happened. She had removed her helmet. He had expected her to laugh it off, maybe scold him for being so bold. But instead, she had done the opposite. She looked vulnerable. "That's not what I meant," Ethan said, his voice quieter than he intended. He stepped back, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. "I didn't mean it in that way." Zara interrupted him, her expression softening just a little. "No need to explain yourself, human," she said, her tone no longer sharp but more contemplative. "You spoke honestly, something I rarely hear. What you said was surprising, but not in a way I would expect from a soldier." Ethan's mouth went dry. He wasn't sure if this was the moment to apologize, to backtrack, or if he should just stand there and let the tension unfold. What did she meant by not in a way I would expect? Did that mean she wasn't offended? Or was she just letting it slide? "I'm not used to being treated like this," Zara continued, her voice now calm, almost reflective. "Most people see me as a symbol, a weapon, a ruler. They never look past the armor. But you saw me as something else." Ethan wasn't sure what to say to that. He had never thought much about Zara in terms of being a ruler or symbol. He had only seen her as a woman, a person strong, yes, but not some untouchable figure. And now, standing before her without her armor, he realized just how human she seemed. "You don't have to be perfect," Ethan said, his words coming out before he could stop them. "Not everyone expects you to be a symbol. You're not some untouchable princess. You're a person." Zara's lips twitched at the edges, though she quickly masked it with her usual composed expression. She looked away for a moment, her gaze drifting toward the window, staring out into the endless expanse of space. "Never been treated as a person," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Always just a leader, a figurehead. People follow me because of what I represent, not who I am." Ethan could see the wariness in her eyes now. It wasn't the first time he had encountered someone of power who had to bear the weight of expectations. But hearing it from Zara made him realize just how lonely that could be. He had always admired her strength and confidence, but now he saw the cracks. Behind her armor, both literal and metaphorical, was a person who longed to be understood. To be seen for who she really was, not just as a queen. "I'm not sure what I can do to change that," Ethan said, his voice gentle. "But I'm here to listen. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm not going anywhere." Zara turned back to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Then, almost as if she had made a decision, she stepped closer to him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, but he stood still, not sure if he should retreat or stay. "Why are you so different from the others?" Zara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan didn't immediately respond. He had no idea how to answer that question. Was he different? He was just doing his job, trying to survive, trying to make sense of this strange situation he had found himself in. But something about Zara made him feel like he could be more than just a soldier. Maybe he could be more than just someone to obey orders. Maybe he could be the one to see her as more than a symbol. "I guess I'm not interested in the politics," Ethan said, shrugging. "I see you as Zara. Just Zara." Zara's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she seemed almost relieved. It was as if the weight of her crown had lessened, even if just by a little. She stepped back, nodding slowly, as if considering his words. "You humans are strange," she murmured. "I've never met anyone who doesn't see me as a ruler first. You're kind, you don't fear me the way the others do. You don't bow, you don't follow blindly. I've never encountered that before." Ethan wasn't sure what to make of that. Was it a compliment? Was she testing him? He didn't know, but he decided not to dwell on it. "So," Ethan began, trying to lighten the mood, now that the armor is off, "does that mean I get to see the real Zara? Or is this just another test?" Zara paused, her eyes narrowing slightly as though she were weighing his words. Then without warning, she smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made her seem a little less intimidating. The change was subtle, but Ethan noticed it immediately. "I suppose we'll see," she said with a shrug, turning away. "The real Zara is not an easy thing to find." Ethan nodded, but his thoughts were swirling. He had never imagined that he'd find himself in a situation like this, standing alone with an alien princess who had opened up to him in a way no one else had. His feelings were conflicted. Part of him was still on edge, unsure whether this was some kind of elaborate game, while another part of him felt connected to her in a way he couldn't explain. As Zara walked toward the door, she glanced over her shoulder. "You'll find out soon enough, Ethan, if you're willing to stay around long enough." With that, she left the room, her steps echoing through the hallway. Ethan remained standing there, his thoughts racing. He had no idea what would come next, but something told him that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. The days that followed were a strange mix of quiet reflection and intense preparation. The warship Valor was heading toward a new mission in alien territory, and the stakes were higher than ever. The crew was tense, focused on the upcoming battle. But in the back of Ethan's mind, one thing occupied his thoughts. Zara, the princess who had removed her armor in front of him, who had shown him a side of herself that no one had ever seen before. Ethan tried to keep his distance. He had always been a soldier, and soldiers didn't get involved with royalty, especially not with someone as powerful as Zara. But it wasn't easy. Their conversations had become frequent, and each one left him more curious than the last. Had never known someone like her, so confident, so untouchable, yet vulnerable in ways that only a few had witnessed. He found himself looking for opportunities to talk to her, even if it was just a quick conversation before or after missions. He didn't want to admit it, but he was becoming drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. The walls he had built around himself were slowly starting to crumble, piece by piece. One evening, after a long day of strategizing, Ethan was making his way to the mess hall when he saw Zara standing alone by the observation window. Her gaze was fixed on the stars, the soft light of distant suns reflecting in her eyes. It was the first time he had seen her without her armor in a while, and the sight of her vulnerable, yet powerful, stirred something in him. He approached her slowly, unsure of what to say, but somehow his feet moved on their own. When he reached her side, he stood silently for a moment, gazing out at the vastness of space. It was peaceful here, away from the chaos of battle, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of calm. "You're here," Zara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost as if she hadn't expected anyone to join her. "I didn't want to disturb you," Ethan replied, unsure of how to continue. I thought I'd see how you were doing." Zara glanced at him, her expression unreadable. There was a slight shift in her posture, as if she were reconsidering something, but then she looked back out at the stars. "I'm fine," she said after a long pause, "just thinking. Sometimes the weight of all this responsibility becomes too much. People look to me for answers, for strength. They don't understand how heavy it is to carry it alone." Ethan's heart softened. He had never thought about what it would be like to be in her position, to be a leader who had to make impossible decisions every day. He was just a soldier, his job was simple in comparison. But hearing her speak so openly about her struggles made him realize how much he had underestimated her. "Zara, I can't pretend to know what you're going through," he said gently. "But I do know that you don't have to carry it all by yourself. You've got people who will stand with you. I'll stand with you." Zara turned to look at him, her gaze steady and searching. For a moment, she didn't speak, as if weighing his words. Then, without a word, she reached up and gently touched his arm, her fingers brushing against his sleeve. It was a simple gesture, but to Ethan, it felt like a bond being formed. "Thank you," Zara said quietly.
You don't know what it means to hear that from someone.
Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, though he couldn't quite explain it. They stood there for a while, side by side, watching the stars in silence. It wasn't awkward, nor was it uncomfortable. It was simply ... peaceful later that night, as the crew prepared for the mission. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between him and Zara. They had crossed a line. It's not in terms of their relationship, but in terms of understanding each other. For the first time, he saw her not just as a leader, but as a person, someone who carried a burden no one else could truly understand. The next day, as the crew gathered in the war room to finalize their plans, Zara was at the head of the table, looking every bit the powerful leader she was. But as she spoke, Ethan noticed the subtle way her hand gripped the edge of the table, the tension in her shoulders. She was still carrying the weight of responsibility, even if she tried to hide it behind her confident exterior. After the meeting, when most of the crew had left, Ethan lingered behind. Zara was reviewing the mission data, her focus sharp as always. But when she looked up and saw him standing there, she raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind, soldier?" she asked, her voice playful. Though there was an undercurrent of seriousness, Ethan hesitated, but he knew this was the moment. He had to say what had been on his mind for days now. "Zara," he began, his voice low but steady. "I just wanted to say that I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. You don't have to hide behind your armor. You've got people who care about you, and I care about you." Zara's eyes softened, and for a moment she looked almost ... vulnerable. But then, as if she were regaining control of her emotions, she straightened up, her usual regal composure returning. "I don't need anyone to care about me," she said firmly. "I'm a leader. That's all I need to be." Ethan wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or him, but he wasn't going to back down. "Not now, maybe," he said, "but even leaders need someone to lean on sometimes." Zara's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Then, without warning, she reached forward and placed a hand on his arm, her touch firm, yet gentle. "I'll take your words to heart, Ethan," she said softly. "But don't mistake this. I am not a woman to be led. I am a leader, and that comes with its own set of rules." Ethan nodded, understanding her words, but also feeling that there was more to this than what she was letting on. He wasn't sure where this strange, complicated connection between them would go. But one thing was certain. It wasn't going away anytime soon. The Valor had entered a new, uncharted region of space. The galaxy around them was unfamiliar and dangerous, filled with hostile alien factions who would not hesitate to attack. The crew had prepared for this mission as if it were their last. The stakes were high, and the tension among them was palpable. Yet amidst all the preparations and the looming danger, Ethan couldn't help but think about Zara. Zara had been quieter these past few days, focused entirely on the mission. Her leadership had always been firm, but lately it seemed as if she was carrying more than just the weight of the upcoming battle. Her earlier openness had been replaced by the stoic, unshakable demeanor of a ruler, and though Ethan respected her strength, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was closing herself off again. He knew that part of it was the pressure of their mission. Zara had always carried the responsibility of leading her people, and now, as a human warship was joining her forces, the expectations were even greater. But Ethan wasn't sure if she even noticed how much she had changed in the past few days. Her usual confidence had become guarded, and he could see that she was struggling with the weight of the decisions she had to make. "Everything all right, Princess?" Ethan asked one afternoon, as he found her standing in front of a holographic map of the enemy's territory. Brow was furrowed, her eyes sharp and calculating, but she didn't seem like the woman he had come to know over the past few weeks. Zara glanced at him, her expression hardening for just a second. "I'm fine, Ethan. Just trying to figure out the best way to approach the enemy's stronghold. This mission is crucial, and I won't let anyone fail." Her tone was commanding, but Ethan could hear the underlying tension in her voice. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about something deeper. She was carrying the burden of her people's future on her shoulders, and the pressure was becoming too much for her to hide. "Zara," Ethan said softly, stepping closer, "you don't have to do this alone. We're all in this together. You don't have to carry the weight of it by yourself." Zara's eyes flickered toward him, and for a brief moment, her mask of composure cracked. He saw a flash of vulnerability in her gaze, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She turned back to the map, her voice cool and distant. "This is my responsibility, Ethan. As the leader of my people, I have to make the decisions. You are here to follow orders, not to question them." Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling the tension between them. He had never been one to blindly follow orders, but he understood that Zara's position was different. She was a princess, a queen, and that came with a set of responsibilities that he could never fully understand. But that didn't mean he couldn't be there for her as much as she seemed to push him away. "Okay," he said, his voice steady but soft. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who will listen without judging you, you know where to find me."
Oh.
Zara didn't answer right away. Instead, she continued to study the map, her fingers brushing over the holographic display. Ethan couldn't tell if she had heard him or if she was just too focused on the task at hand to care. Either way, he wasn't going to force her to open up. He knew she had to do it on her own time. Later that day, as the crew prepared for the mission, Ethan noticed a change in the way Zara carried herself. There was still that air of authority about her, but this time there was a faint tremor in her hands as she gave orders. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Ethan saw it. She was worried. As the warship made its way deeper into enemy territory, the tension aboard the Valor grew. Ethan could feel it in the air. Every officer, every soldier was on edge. The unknowns of the mission weighed heavily on their minds. But despite everything, Ethan couldn't help but think of Zara. She was so much more than the stoic, unshakable leader she portrayed herself to be. Beneath the surface, she was struggling, just like everyone else. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the radar. A vast fleet of alien warships that outnumbered the Valar by more than 2-1. The battle was inevitable. The crew had trained for this moment, but it was impossible to prepare for the chaos of a real war. Zara stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the battle strategies and tactics on the screens in front of her. Her face was set in a grim expression, but Ethan could see the strain in her eyes. She was calculating, making split-second decisions, but each one felt like a weight she had to bear alone. "Deploy the fleet," she commanded, her voice firm, though there was an edge of uncertainty beneath it. "We attack now while we still have the advantage." The crew sprang into action, and the battle began in earnest. The hum of the warship's engines, the blare of alarms, the sound of weaponry firing, it was all a blur of movement and chaos. Ethan found himself in the thick of it, directing the crew as they worked to defend the ship and strike back at the enemy. He caught sight of Zara once again, standing tall amidst the chaos, barking orders at her crew. But this time, he saw something else in her. She wasn't just a princess or a leader. She was a woman fighting for her people, doing everything she could to protect them, even if it meant putting herself at risk. He admired her more than ever before, despite the overwhelming odds. The battle raged on. The Valor held its ground, the crew fighting with everything they had. Ethan, along with the rest of the crew, had no time to think about anything other than survival. But every time he glanced over at Zara, he could see that she was becoming more and more affected by the battle. Her face was set with determination, but her hands were shaking, the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her as the battle reached its climax. The enemy forces began to retreat, but not without inflicting heavy damage on the Valor. The ship had taken a hit, and the crew was scrambling to make repairs. Zara stood at the command center, her eyes scanning the damage reports, but it was clear she was exhausted. Ethan approached her, his face grim. "We made it through, but at what cost?" he asked quietly. Zara looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment there was nothing but silence between them. Then finally she spoke. "We'll rebuild," she said, her voice steady, though there was a faint crack in it. "We always do." But as Ethan looked at her, he saw something he hadn't seen before. A leader who, despite her strength, was carrying a heavy burden. Wasn't sure if she could carry it for much longer. The sounds of the battle had barely settled before the crew began the daunting task of assessing the damage. The Valor had been hit hard during the fight, and though the enemy had retreated, their presence still lingered in the aftermath. There was a tense silence aboard the ship as repairs were underway, and everyone knew that they had barely survived this time. In fact, it was only just beginning. Ethan stood in the mess hall, sipping his coffee. As he tried to collect his thoughts, previous hours had been a blur of action, explosions, and adrenaline. He had been in countless battles, but this one felt different. The stakes were higher. And through it all, Zara had been the calm at the center of the storm. Her leadership unwavering despite the chaos. He had always respected her, but seeing her take charge in that command center, surrounded by the wreckage of a war that had nearly destroyed them, made him realize how much she carried. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader of her people, a woman who bore the weight of countless lives in her hands. And somehow she made it look easy. But Ethan knew it wasn't easy. No one who had seen her in action could believe that for a second. Beneath her tough exterior, she was human, just like the rest of them. And humans had limits. He walked down the hallway, heading toward the command center, his thoughts focused on Zara. He knew she was probably busy, dealing with the aftermath of the battle, but something told him that she needed a moment of peace. Just a moment, away from the pressure and the responsibility. When he reached the command center, he found Zara standing near one of the consoles, her eyes scanning through the damage reports. Her face was as stern as ever, but there was a weariness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. She looked up when she noticed Ethan standing in the doorway. "Ethan," she said, her voice flat, though there was a hint of relief in her tone. "I was just going over the reports. Ship's damaged, but we'll manage. It's nothing we can't handle." Ethan studied her for a moment, taking in the exhaustion in her eyes. She was still standing tall, still trying to project strength, but the cracks were there if you looked closely enough. He stepped closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to carry all of this on your own, Zara," he said quietly. "We made it through because of you, yes, but you're not alone. We're all in this together." Zara hesitated, her eyes flickering briefly to his before she turned away, focusing once again on the data on the screen in front of her. "I know," she replied, her voice soft but still guarded. "But the decisions I make don't just affect me. They affect my people. And I can't afford to show weakness. I can't afford to let them see me falter." Ethan felt a pang of sympathy in his chest. He had seen leaders before, but none like Zara. She had the weight of an entire species on her shoulders. And yet she still tried to protect everyone around her, herself included. She thought that if she showed any sign of weakness, it would all fall apart. "Zara," he said, his voice steady but warm. "No one expects you to be perfect. You're doing the best you can, and that's more than enough." Zara didn't answer right away. She stood there for a long time, her gaze still fixed on the screen. Though Ethan could tell she wasn't seeing anything anymore. She was lost in thought, trapped by the burden of responsibility. Ethan took a step closer and placed a hand on her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. "You don't have to do it alone," he repeated, his voice gentle but firm. Zara finally looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. For the first time in a while, there was no armor in her gaze, no mask of authority or confidence. A woman who was tired and struggling, just like everyone else. "I don't know how to let go," she whispered, almost as if to herself. "I don't know how to stop being the leader they all expect me to be." Ethan's heart ached for her. He didn't have all the answers, and he couldn't take away her pain. But he knew one thing for sure. She didn't have to carry it alone. She didn't have to be the perfect leader all the time. She just had to be herself. "You don't have to let go," he said softly. "But you do have to trust us. Let us help you when you need it." Zara looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time, she allowed herself to show a hint of vulnerability. She didn't smile, but her expression softened. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Ethan," she said quietly. "I never thought I could trust anyone the way I trust you." Ethan felt a rush of warmth, a feeling he couldn't explain. Words meant more than anything else she could have said, but he didn't speak them. Instead, he simply nodded and gave her a reassuring smile. "We're in this together," he said. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the battle still lingering in the air, but the connection between them growing stronger. There was no need for words now. They both understood. The ship continued its repairs, and the crew settled into their roles, each person working hard to restore the Valor to its former strength. But there was something new between Zara and Ethan. Now a bond forged in the heat of battle, in the shared understanding of what it meant to lead and to follow. They were no longer just soldier and princess, were partners, standing together against whatever the galaxy threw at them. As the days passed, the Valar slowly recovered, and so did Zara. She was still the leader of her people, still the fierce, unyielding force that had earned the respect of the galaxy. But she was also someone who knew that it was okay to lean on others, to trust in them when the weight of leadership became too much. And Ethan, standing by her side, knew that. He would be there for her no matter what came next. The Valor drifted through space, its engines humming steadily as it sailed deeper into the unknown. The crew worked tirelessly, making repairs to the ship and preparing for whatever was to come. The battle had left them shaken, but they had survived. And now they had to push forward. Ethan stood by the observation window, gazing out at the stars. It had been a week since the battle, and the ship was slowly returning to full strength. But despite the quiet hum of the ship and the steady progress of repairs, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that things had changed, both on the ship and between him and Zara. She had been quieter lately, but there was a new calmness to her. The weight of leadership still hung on her shoulders, but she no longer seemed as burdened by it. He had watched her these past few days, observing how she moved through the ship with a renewed sense of purpose. There was something different about her, something that had shifted since their conversation in the command center. Zara had begun to open up more, sharing her thoughts and fears in private moments between the two of them. She no longer tried to hide her vulnerabilities behind the walls of her leadership. She was still strong, still the fierce ruler of her people. But now there was a gentler side to her, one that Ethan was beginning to see more clearly. The sound of footsteps behind him broke his thoughts. He turned to see Zara approaching, her posture as commanding as always. But there was a softness in her expression now that hadn't been there before. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but warm, "we need to talk." He nodded, stepping away from the window. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Zara glanced around the hallway before meeting his gaze. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day after the battle, about how I don't have to do this alone." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had said those words in the heat of the moment, not expecting them to have such an impact. But now, seeing Zara stand before him, he realized how much they had affected her. She had always been strong, but beneath that strength there was a loneliness that she had tried to hide. She had never allowed herself to depend on anyone, not even those closest to her. "I meant every word," Ethan said, his voice soft but sincere. "I'm not going anywhere, Zara. You don't have to carry it all alone. We're all here for you." Zara smiled, though it was a small smile. She stepped closer, her presence still commanding, but there was an ease to her movements now. A sense of comfort she hadn't allowed herself before. "I don't know how to let go of this," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I've spent so long being the one who holds everything together. I've been afraid to trust others with the weight of it all." Ethan could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear of showing weakness. But he also saw something else at hope, a glimmer of the woman she was, beneath the armor of leadership. He had always known that Zara was more than just a ruler. She was a person, just like him, with hopes, fears, and dreams. "You don't have to do it all at once," Ethan said gently. "Start small. Trust the people around you. Trust me. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Zara took a deep breath, as if weighing his words. For a moment, there was silence between them, the hum of the ship, the only sound in the air. Finally she spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Maybe it's time I let go of some of the weight I've been carrying, she said, her voice soft but resolute. I've been so focused on being the leader that I forgot what it meant to be human. Ethan smiled, a sense of relief washing over him. He had known that this moment would come, that Zara would come to terms with the burden she had been carrying, and now it seemed she was ready to begin the process of letting go. One step at a time. I'm here for you, Zara, Ethan said, his voice steady and reassuring. Whatever happens, I'm with you. You don't have to carry it alone. Zara's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to lean on him. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a simple gesture, but it meant more than words could express. In that moment, they weren't just leader and soldier. They were two people, standing together, facing the unknown side by side. I think I'm ready for that, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ow! Ready to trust you? Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with warmth. It was a small step, but it was the beginning of something new. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt confident that they could face it together. No matter what came next, they would stand side by side, supporting each other as equals. Later that evening, the crew gathered in the mess hall to discuss the next phase of their mission. As usual, Zara stood at the front, commanding the room with her presence. But this time, Ethan noticed something different about her. She wasn't just the leader anymore. She was also a person who trusted those around her, who was ready to face the challenges ahead without the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. The meeting was brief, but there was a new sense of camaraderie in the air. The crew, once tense and uncertain, now seemed more united, more confident. It was as if the bond between Zara and Ethan had spread throughout the entire ship, creating a sense of solidarity that hadn't been there before. As the meeting came to a close, Zara turned to Ethan with a quiet smile. Thank you, she said, her voice soft but filled with meaning. For being here, for believing in me. Ethan smiled back, his heart full. You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what I can. We're in this together. Zara nodded, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken understanding. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it together.